endorse any products. That's not part of our practice. We are platform agnostic. We will reference a number of free tools that our staff and teachers have vetted for things like student accessibility and protecting student privacy. Some attendees in the room might recommend other tools as well in the chat. We really can't endorse those though if we've not tried them out and vetted them. But we just want you to keep in mind student accessibility. Can all students get to that tool? And student privacy. Does it store student information that shouldn't be stored? And also, we don't want you to pay for anything. There's just so many good free tools available that you shouldn't have to take anything out of your pocket. So that's the end of my caveat there. And this is the group that's bringing you today's webinar. Really, the entire staff has helped put this on. This isn't a canned presentation that we had on the shelf waiting to use. We put it together in a very short amount of time. So we'll skip these bios. We have them for now on the resource page. You can check out who we are, but we're going to hop right into the presentation because we know this takes a little bit of time. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Gitanjali Soni. Are you on board there, Dr. Soni?
I am. Good afternoon. This is Gitanjali Soni, Director for Teaching and Learning here at NCVPS, NCVirtual. If you would go to the next slide. I would just like to start us off by pointing you to this particular resource. There are several good resources on this webpage put together by DPI, NCDPI. They are subject-specific resources. They are general resources. There's a lot of stuff that we will not cover in this meeting, so you can actually go in here and pick out what you'd like. Just wanted to introduce that to you before we go on to the next slide. Okay, so again, the decision to implement online instruction is exciting, but it also can be a little intimidating knowing where to start, because although online teaching has many, many similarities with what you do every day in the classroom, there are some differences. So let's start by looking at some of the similarities. In the online environment, learning must continue, curriculum objectives must be in place, assessments must measure learning, and communication must occur. What are some of the differences? Differences include the lack of face-to-face contact and communication that happens more easily in a face-to-face classroom. Communication is also moved from being largely synchronous or live to being mainly asynchronous. And communication becomes even more critical. It becomes absolutely critical. And what else do you need? You need digital tools and resources that you have to employ in order to communicate with your students. We will focus on some of these differences during this webinar. However, there's some great news. You already have what it takes. You already know your curriculum. You're already great teachers and expert teachers. You have lesson plans. You know the objectives you need to meet. You simply are about to embark upon a journey that helps you package those things slightly differently for your students. So prepare to let your creativity shine. Next slide, please. So please keep this in mind. You will not be on this journey alone. What are some of the perspectives you need to keep in mind? There will be various expectations and perspectives that overlap throughout the duration of your online lessons. The key players are you as the teacher, your parents, no, sorry, not your parents, your students and their parents, and the administration at each of your schools. You will be wearing two hats, both of which may have a learning curve if you have no prior online teaching experience. You will need to curate content and or move content online. But you will also need to teach online with the same expectations that you adhere to in your traditional classroom. You will need to provide instruction, curriculum resources, practice activities, and assessments. And of course, grade student work and give feedback. Remember, your students will also come into this new experience with a learning curve. They will need flexibility, some gentleness, flexibility with assignment deadlines, consideration of bandwidth, their home life schedules, and overall access to devices will also play a part in their success. Parents will share some of the same perspectives as students from a support role. They will also take on a new role as classroom teacher assistant and may very well step in to answer some technical questions, etc. Remember that parents will have a wide range of technical and online experience, and that may affect you as a teacher. And last but not least, each of your districts expects learning to continue happening in the classrooms. They will also have other district level and school level expectations you'll need to implement in your new classroom. All this sounds intimidating, but don't worry. You already really have most of the skills you need, and this webinar will provide you with more. We will share a lot of resources. Try to pick one that really speaks to you. Please make sure that you have the permission to use it in your district. Then you can start to build a plan with your next steps to move forward. Next slide, please. Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Textbooks, documents, tools, websites, now what? Whether you've just started your teaching career or you've been out there 10, 20, or even 30 years, you most likely have a combination of all kinds of textbooks and documents and websites that you use with lessons you already teach. And to add to that, you've probably been exposed and inundated with abundance of websites and tools and tips and tricks over the past week. And while all of them are meant to help, they can also be very intimidating and overwhelming. So what does happen when you move from face-to-face to online? How do you deal with those textbooks, the documents, the tools, the websites? In this part of the presentation, we're going to focus in on a few key resources that will help you get started with the transition. Next slide, please.
Hey everyone, this is Darlene Schaefer and I'm an instructional designer. I'm going to talk about exploring, evaluating, and making sure that you set up good explanation for those engaging resources. So no doubt you are starting to feel inundated perhaps with all of the online resources out there. You're thinking about, what are some good ways and some best practices to bring the content that I use in my classroom online. And we're here to assure you that a lot of the best practices that you follow are very similar in the online environment. So you're going to start by asking yourself, what are my goals and objectives? What do I intend to accomplish? What specific standards am I trying to align to? And does this tool or resource online fulfill my intended objectives? How much will I need to add to fill in the gaps for my students' learning? Also, as you review resources and tools, ask yourself, what supports will my students need to use it? What directions and introductory information will I need to provide in order to explain and introduce the tool and resource to my students? Does it provide information in multiple formats to accommodate various learning styles? Is it intuitive enough for the students to use and to navigate? And does it flow with the lesson and their current sequence of instruction? Is this something that picks up from their prior learning? And will you need to provide some sort of bridge to introduce it in some way? Also ask yourself, is it really free? You're probably getting a full inbox and a full news feed of free resources. Well, think about that, because is it really free? So what are the terms of use? When you're checking a box, what are you agreeing to? Does the resource require a subscription? And without a paid option, are you going to lose your access to that resource in case you want to use it later or need to use it, long term? And does the resource comply with FERPA and honor student privacy? If it asks to include student information or require students when they log in to provide that, then this is probably not something that's a good idea to use. We can go ahead and move over to the next slide, and I'll turn it back over to Chris, and he's going to talk about best practices for presenting materials such as images or documents.
All right, thank you, Darlene. Screenshots, and more screenshots. So we live in a digital age where phones, cell phones, and tablets allow us to capture content in an instant just by taking a picture of something. And when we have to move from face-to-face to online in a quick amount of time, that's one of the first places a lot of people turn to use to move content. However, there are some issues that come along with that. So copyright is the first one. And we're not going to go too far deep into the copyright piece, but just know that moving from one method to the other, you're probably most likely violating some copyright laws and regulations when you do that. But most importantly is how it impacts our students and their ability to learn. And there's two issues related to that. The first one is digital accessibility. So when you grab that content as an image, when you take a screenshot of it and post it that way, or most of the time when you scan paper documents in using a scanner, it grabs that information as images, and that text is embedded in those images. And so someone who's visually impaired would use something like a screen reader to access that content, and the screen reader can't pull that text out of that image. Also, when it comes to manipulating the image, other students, you can zoom in and out of that image, but the text does not change size when you do so. So most of the time, if students need to manipulate the information, it can become distorted and blurry because that text does not move when that image moves around. So we want to, as much as possible, avoid taking the screenshots and scanning documents as images and loading them into our course for those reasons. So we'll go on to the next slide. Mentioned copyright on the last slide. We're going to talk about some resources that are free for you to use in terms of finding Creative Commons images, content to put in your course to make it more eye-appealing and engaging. For those of you who aren't familiar with copyright or with Creative Commons, it just basically means that you have the ability to use the images for these purposes. So we've listed 3 tools on the page: Pixabay, Unsplash, CC Search. Those are not all the options, but they are good options. We do want to make sure that you're not just going out to Google and doing a search and finding the coolest images you can find and putting those in your course. 1, because we don't always know where they've come from, and 2, most likely there is some copyright attached to those images. So if you use these 3 sources, and we're going to share this presentation so you'll have access to these links, but if you use these 3 resources, you know that you have permission to use them. And after you download the image, it gives you the citation information you need to just copy and paste right into your digital content. So all bases are covered. So if we could go to the next slide. And so when it comes to teaching online, moving content online, one of the things you need is a method to deliver that instruction to students. And most likely that comes through a learning management system. And so there's different options out there like Canvas and Moodle and Blackboard and D2L and Brightspace, and the list goes on. If you're a K2 teacher, that may look more like something like the Seesaw app or Class Dojo. We have identified throughout the day today and other webinars that K2 is a need. I'm going to be taking the lead on that and focusing on some of that. I taught kindergarten my first year. I have a first grader. So over the next week, we're going to really put some focus into that, but we're going to talk about traditional LMSs for a little bit here and all the features that they have. So the commonalities between them are a few things. They all have what we call content pages, which is where you basically put information you're trying to share with students on there, almost like a plain web page. So you could, this would be your learning objectives. This would be a lesson introduction and different things like that, the hook to get students ready to learn. Then we have announcements. They're the dynamic part of the course. And announcements are where we post weekly and daily updates for students about what's going on, but we also can use it to supplement instruction. If we see students are struggling in a certain area, we can pop some additional information into the announcements and help them out. Assignment pages with this piece, this is where you create a wide variety of activities or assignments in Canvas, and students can submit work as documents, as presentations, projects, and all sorts of stuff. They can type right in a text editor, add URLs, and different ways of submission. The other dynamic piece of a learning management system are the discussion forums. And so these are meant to be a place where the teacher and students can interact back and forth. They can be formal about a particular assignments and the way that that's how you collect work for an assignment, or they can be informal, just where students can ask questions along the way. The key is if you have like one question that you want a student to answer and you don't want anyone else to respond, you just want that one response from a student, a discussion forum is not the best place for that. That's more of an assignment. And the final thing we'll talk about here are quizzes. And so one of the things that instantly pops into most people's heads are, well, how do we make sure they're not cheating on things? And so unfortunately, one of the first places people turn is to setting time limits on those quizzes. And we're in a time where time can cause undue stress and is not necessarily needed. And that doesn't always prevent the cheating piece that we're looking at. So rather than that, the suggestions are that you use the learning management system features to create banks of questions. If you have 10 on an assessment, create an extra 2 or 3. Put all those in there and set them to randomize how they're displayed and randomize the answer choices. And that helps prevent the cheating piece. There are different types of questions available. There are fill in the blank, multiple choice, matching, and different things available through most learning management systems. If you don't have access that you know of to a learning management system, there are free accounts available for teachers, for Canvas, and for Google Classroom. But you'll also want to check with your district to make sure what's going on in your district is what you're using. Same thing with the building concept. You want to make sure that everyone within the building's working in the same parameters. So just make sure you check with your school leaders and your district leaders before you dive into this area. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Chris. So this is Darlene again. So Chris talked a little bit about some common learning management system features. I'm going to talk a little bit about some best practices to keep in mind in order to present your content in the most intuitive, interactive, and operable way for your students. First, we recommend that you set up the content organized by module and lesson versus simply day of the week. This allows you to set up and chunk or group the material by concept, by standard, or by lesson, rather than having it grouped simply day by day and week by week. So this will give your students some more flexibility in order to complete their work at home. They can complete, again, by concept, by standard, and feel less obligated to work on a pace that's day by day. We also recommend you view the course as you set up content in student view. You're going to have a certain access as a teacher that your students will not necessarily have. So when you're editing, you'll be able to see editing tools. You may be able to see content that you have set up in one course but not in other. And so your students may, again, not have access based on where they're enrolled in the learning management system. So it's a good practice to definitely do a student view just to make sure that students are perceiving content as you intend. You also want to use the rich content editor or the editing tool built into the learning management system. It's similar to, like in PowerPoint or Word, there's a toolbar where you can enter content, you can insert images. So it's in a LMS, it's typically called a rich content editor. So you want to make sure that you manually install the content, your own images, your files, through those various icons on the toolbar. Often on that rich content editor, they also have an ability to record audio and video right there in line. So you can add that to your pages, to your announcements. And then make sure you link websites by the site title. So there's an example, crash course video on the constitutional compromise versus click here. This will allow for accessibility and then also allow for your students to see what it is that they're going to be opening. We also recommend that you input text and math type directly into the rich content editor. This ensures operability, accessibility, and that the content's formatted correctly. If you are going to toggle to HTML mode and bring over HTML code, make sure that the code is for a precise resource. So avoid copying over code from one course to another or sharing whole code from something you've done with your colleagues, just because once again, your students may not be able to access all that material and you may impact the formatting when doing it that way. So we can go ahead and move over to the next slide. And this one will focus on some resources that that are available that you can use as a foundation to set up for your online classrooms. So one that we recommend is the OER Commons. This is a link, and you'll get a copy of this presentation to the Go Open North Carolina Commons, and you can search by subject, search by grade level. These are content that is either in the public domain or it's a license for you to use for educational purposes. NCVPS is adding some instructional videos and resources as well, so look for that in the coming weeks. Some of the things that we'll be providing for a range of subject areas. DPI also has Google Sites set up specifically by subject area for curriculum instruction, and you can search by course, by grade level, and as Dr. Sani shared in one of our opening slides, they've also set up a site that's targeted toward remote learning and distance learning that can help you as you get started on your online journey with your students. A few others sources that we recommend that have a wealth of resources that are in the public domain or available for educational use include the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian. They have a good range of humanities and arts and sciences resources, even some virtual tours if you want to set some of those up for your students. And then Common Lit is a good resource if you're looking for English and reading style exemplars that are fairly similar in structure to what you might see on an end of course or end of grade test. So these are some resources that, that we advise you to perhaps start from at the discretion of your district and using your own, professional expertise as well. So next slide, please.
All right, guys. This is Brandon Simmons. My colleague Amber Parker and I have been monitoring the chat for questions. So just remember, if you have a question during the presentation, you can post it in the chat and we will answer it at designated times throughout the presentation. So Dr. Chris Smith, we have a couple questions for you since you're our resident kindergarten expert. Really what we see in trends in the chat is more detail about how all this could apply to kindergarten and using parents' emails for kindergarten. And will prescribed K curriculum be used at all for any of this?
So at this moment, in terms of, I'd posted to the chat, but in case anyone didn't see, with the email addresses and how that's dealt with in terms of parents and underage students, generally that can be 13 and younger, that will be more of a district thing and what they choose to go with and how they decide to go from there. In terms of a standardized piece from DPI at the kindergarten level, we're still coordinating with DPI to look at what we can put together next week in terms of what that might look like. I don't know that we're going to have a full coordinated, like this goes out to every kindergarten teacher in the state and this is how you'll do it. But we will be working together with all of our resources within the organization to put together some things to help you out and see what this might look like for those younger students.
All right, and this is also for the panelists. What about teaching students with exceptional children or students with limited or no technology? I would assume this is some of the district decisions, but just wanted to ask our panelists to discuss if they would like.
Yeah, I'll just add that this is more of a district decision. I know some districts have already been working on ways that they can find to provide hardware for students to check out and different options. So that's one that you'll really want to check with your school leadership and your district leadership on and get some guidance there as to how to proceed in that area.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. We will have another time for Q&A in just a little bit, so please keep those questions coming.
Okay, and as we move on, the next piece that we're going to talk about are closed caption videos. So when it comes to accessibility, digital accessibility, if you have a student in your class who's identified as visually impaired, or there might be other reasons, an English language learner, someone with dyslexia, some other different things. I know we have some EC teachers in the room. So captions and transcripts are always a big thing. And so when it comes to adding video content, one of the things we really want to look for in the videos we use are that they have closed captions. So we have a slide where we've provided some resources. The top one is Discovery Education. We realize that that might not be available globally. Your district would have to have a subscription to that. And then once you're inside of there, there are a lot of Discovery Education videos that have already been captioned. And if you do have a subscription to that and come across some that aren't, you can work with your district rep and they will usually help you get those captioned. We also have YouTube listed, and we realize that some districts have the YouTube blocked. We are in a different situation where students are going to be working remotely from home, and so that might open up some of those gaps. There still might be issues, but it's a good resource in terms of the ability to find and locate videos that already have captions. So they have an advanced search feature that you can go in and use and search for only videos that have captioned. And then we put some major channels in here that we listed. Khan Academy, you can go to separate outside of YouTube. All of their video content is captioned. Bozeman Science, Senior Jordan for Spanish, TED Ed, and then Crash Course has a variety of subjects. It has anatomy, astronomy, history, biology, chemistry. The list goes on and on. Physics, psychology, where you can get content that you can use that already has this support in place in terms of closed captioning. So if we could go to the next slide, please.
Hey everyone. So as Dr. Smith showed you, there are certainly catalogs and catalogs of educational videos that you can pull content from. There are also a range of tools, however, that you can use to screencast or make your own videos or present even a live classroom session for your students. So here's some tips to follow as you select a screencasting and or live classroom tool. Again, this is something that we advise you to do at the discretion of your district to find out, what you have access to, what your students have access to. But some things to consider: is it easy to share? So if you set up a live classroom, or if you create a video, can you get a link or a file? Is it easy for students to join or to view? Is it sustainable for you? So does it provide a file, for example? Like, does it allow for you to save and record and output a movie file that you can use after the trial period if you're using it during a trial period? And does it allow for you to present your webcam and a resource? Like, let's say you wanted to have the students see you, maybe see each other, but then you also wanted to walk through on a whiteboard or include a slide presentation. Some of the strong tools out there will allow for you to do both. And then if you're selecting a live conference tool, does the live conference tool allow for students to share audio and video if needed, so that you can get their input as well as you're conducting a live conference session? So here's a few that you can consider, again, at the discretion of your district. PowerPoint by itself is, fairly, it's a, fairly good tool to choose. You can add audio to your slides. You can even save it as a file. There's different formats that you can save a PowerPoint in, like a PDF, for example. So it's flexible. It can be shared in a range of formats. It's pretty good with accessibility. You can use its accessibility checker. Google Slides is similar in scope to PowerPoint. And then Google also has Hangout Meet available, where you can do one-on-one sessions or even full group sessions with your students. Screencast-O-Matic is another tool or resource that quite a few of our teachers use for daily instruction. One benefit to Screencast-O-Matic is, even with the free account, it does allow for you to download an MP4 movie file that you can save and maintain. Your rich content editor, again, that edit space in your learning management system, also allows for you to put in place an impromptu webcam so that you can use that as a resource, so your students can see you as you're presenting to them. So next slide, please.
So we've talked a lot about accessibility in different parts of the last few slides. And so we're going to add another piece to that to kind of hopefully put you at ease a little bit. Most of you are all at a big advantage compared to those who started the year teaching online, because you have had almost an entire school year, or even at least almost half a semester, to truly get to know your students and the needs they have. You know the support they need to have. And so with that, you know firsthand if there are students in your class right now that need captioning, that need different supports, maybe visually impaired or deaf or hard of hearing. And so when it comes to closed captions, there are some provisions in terms of the teacher created videos that you might add to your course. So if you're adding something that's a one-time use, maybe something you're adding a motivational video in your announcement to keep students going, or help them kind of pick me up type thing, or just inform them about what's coming up or going on, or maybe you're doing kind of a walk-through screen capture tour of your class. Those are one-time use. And if you know already that you don't have a student identified as visually impaired that uses, or not visually impaired, but hearing, deaf or hard of hearing, that uses those supports, you're okay to go ahead and put those in your class without captioning them. Now, I would suggest maybe you type out a transcript ahead of time. It definitely helps with not having to record as many times and making a more fluid recording. And then you can actually save that transcript or as a transcript and share that with your students, maybe for those who might need it in terms of, you know, English as a second language and other things. So that's just an idea to keep in mind, that if you're using those one-time videos, they don't necessarily have to be captioned. So we're ready for the next slide.
All right, so thank you again for putting your questions in the chat. We've been following along with you. Couple things. First, there's a lot of questions in the chat that need to be directed towards your district leadership. Whether or not you're grading online work at this time, or whether you're covering new material, those are all questions for your individual district. So please reach out to them with that. I also want to let you know that we are creating a FAQ document where we're documenting all of these questions, and we'll be posting those answers on our website. Couple questions for our curriculum and instruction team, and then one question for our tech team. Questions for our curriculum and instruction team. We have a question about using, advice about using hyper docs in online learning, as well as potentially using Nearpod lessons. Whoever would like to take those two questions. Chris or Darlene, would you like to ask the answer about the Nearpod or HyperDocs?
We can definitely look into those as we're looking at resources. We haven't done so up to this point because we don't use those resources, but we are going to, at the end of this presentation, we're going to provide a survey that you can give us more information, and we're going to be putting together additional webinars, virtual office hours, and resources moving forward. So those will definitely be some things we can look at as we do that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Smith. And then the final question for our technology team, we've had a couple of questions around, will the chat transcript be available to participants at a later time?
Hey, this is Brian. I'll answer that. So after this, we've held a few of these webinars. We're going to be adding all of them to the resource site on our website. And if someone could put that, I think Amber, yes, it looks like Amber Parker just shared that in the chat. Just stay tuned and bookmark that site. And we will have those resources available to you with additional resources. And as Dr. Smith and Dr. Simmons did say, we will be providing a Google form at the end of this presentation, and that's where we can channel a lot more of your questions. We can provide answers and then kind of shape what we need to do for future meetings, office hours, and virtual resources.
All right, thank you, Brian. So again, we'll be having another Q&A period in a few slides, so continue to post your questions in the chat, and we'll be monitoring those from there.
Thank you, Brian. This is back to Gitanjali. So Darlene and Chris talked a lot about how to get your content over online. Now let's talk a little bit about the other side of the instruction, which is the instruction. How can you extend this content through instruction? Just as in your classroom, you can connect your resources to students' lives, engage students, build relationships, and hence promote student learning. Your voice is equally important in the online environment. You can add the personal touch and extend content through strategies like teacher talk, announcements, providing feedback. These are all strategies we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Student learning benefits from your ability to tie the content and resources all together in an exciting, engaging package. As teachers facilitating instruction online, you are the glue that holds it all together. This is what makes it different from just going to a website which has a lot of content on it. Next slide, please. So the first strategy I'm going to talk a little bit about is teacher talk. What is teacher talk? Teacher talk includes things that you do in your classroom all the time. It's things like detailed directions, specific and clear instructions, clarifications, the introduction to the material, relating it to students' lives, and such forth. Most of what you would say in your room to engage and motivate students can also be added online. We've provided you a written example of that on the slide, and I'll let you take a second to read through that. So as you read through that example, we provide you with the tip. Use audio. You are the continuity for students in this big change, which is a change in almost every other aspect of their learning. They are even more dependent on you to create and maintain a community online. They are already used to your voice and manner. Let them hear it. We all have access to simple recording devices, even our smartphones. So utilize that and let the students hear you online as well. Next slide, please. So along with teacher talk, you can also extend student learning through detailed, specific, and personalized feedback when grading. As in your face-to-face feedback, students need specific face-to-face classroom. Students need specific feedback on their areas of strength and areas for improvement. Students online will still need to see specific and detailed explanations for areas of improvement as a way to learn from errors and misunderstandings. You can include feedback that contains audio, text, or even visual and video material. Remember to give specific details and explanations about when assignments are due and what the expectations are. If you have rubrics, you can even put those online. A few other things about grading. Grading daily, Monday through Friday, can help students proceed to the next lessons in a timely manner. Best practices for grading would be for it to occur within the next instructional day after an assignment is submitted. This way they stayed engaged and motivated. Be prepared to spend a large amount of time giving feedback for all your graded assignments. Our tip for this is that you can create canned feedback responses to copy and paste and then personalize for each student. This is especially helpful when you have to provide detailed feedback regarding common questions or misconceptions. Many people who teach online maintain a document of explanations and questions that they have gotten over semesters and use that to personalize as the basis to personalize responses back to their students. Next one, please. Another form of communication is an online announcement. These announcements go out to the whole class, unlike feedback, which is personalized for each student. Announcements will play a huge part of your daily and weekly lessons because they can reach the entire class. Announcements can be used to inform students about what they will be learning about and what their goals are. They can also be used to extend the content that you have already put online through additional materials or links to instructional resources. This is a great opportunity for you to showcase examples and implement digital tools for engagement. However, do remember not to overwhelm either yourself or your students by using too many tools all at once in each online announcement. Again, a couple of tips. Audio is very quick and easy. It's a good way to let students hear your vocal explanations. Also use announcements as a way to celebrate students. Just be careful of violating FERPA regulations and sharing any private information. Personal celebrations of students will catch their attention if they see their names highlighted for online success. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about communication. We have already talked about several other forms of communication, such as feedback and announcements. Let's talk about communication through things that we use, such as text, email, telephone, and if you're using an LMS, that might have an inbuilt communication system. Communication is critical in the online environment since there is no face-to-face interaction. It is advisable to set up a plan to communicate with your students, parents, and other stakeholders. For example, you can plan to send out a weekly email, which will help your classes and students stay on task. You could also plan to have bi-weekly parent communication so that everybody's on the same page and is in touch. A few thoughts about these messages. Remember to use an informal and friendly tone to deliver messages. Use communication strategies that are professional, positive, and culturally sensitive for students, parents, and stakeholders. We like to say read and reread for clarity. Reread for intended meaning and possible misinterpretations. Over-explain if needed. Remember that without the tone of your voice, facial expression, and body language, it is sometimes easy to misunderstand what is being said. Encourage responses by asking open-ended questions. Example, what do you think is a great, it's a favorite of mine because it really does invite a response. And remember, you can use several different ways to communicate. As I mentioned, email, text, chat, phone. Just refer to your district policies to make sure you're following all guidelines. Another tip is that it's a great idea to document all communication in some form. We also have a tip saying use office hours. Let students know when your office hours are and how and where students can call in or log in to chat with you. This is a great way to provide individual support and provide some of the emotional and educational support that you might have been doing face-to-face. Next slide, please. So with this, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer Nobles to continue some more about instruction online.
Thank you, everyone. This is Jennifer Nobles, and I'm going to talk to you about a word you all know very well, personalization. Online learning provides a great opportunity for personalization. We have already talked about personalizing feedback while grading and in communication. You can further personalize instruction by providing flexibility in pacing and due dates. Additionally, depending on students' circumstances, you can make accommodations for exempting or augmenting assignments. You should always implement modifications and accommodations according to individual student needs and/or students' individualized educational plans. As the teacher, strive to always incorporate your students' interests, experiences, and current news and topics in your feedback and announcements. Next slide, please. As the online teacher, you should also always exhibit professionalism in communication, ethics, punctuality, and deadlines as it relates to all of your teacher-related tasks. Remember to abide by FERPA when communicating about students. Some other things to keep in mind are abiding by copyright law and guidelines when using instructional resources, adhering to the North Carolina State Board of Education Code of Ethics, and adhering to your district's social media policies. Remember, you are not alone, and this is a great opportunity for you to demonstrate support of fellow colleagues through positive and encouraging communication during this transitional period. Our tip here is, you don't have to do this alone. Collaborate with other teachers for encouragement, support, and shared resources. This should be a team effort. All right, Adam, ready for more questions?
Yes, we are.
All right, guys. So really good job on posting your questions here. Again, remember we're going to be doing the FAQ that will be posted at a later date. We've got several questions about what do I do if I do not have internet access or my students do not have internet access. I posted a link in the chat to the DPI page on that topic. So please look to there for answers around that. Other questions that we were getting in is specifically around students with accommodations, students with 504s, and things like that. Chris, do you want to just speak briefly about dealing with students with special needs or exceptional children with specific plans?
Sure, I'll jump in and add a few comments. I'll first add that watch for communications coming out from the Department of Public Instruction, because they've already sent out some communication concerning how we're going to be supporting students with IEPs and 504 plans. But I did add to the chat, and I'll reiterate that learning management tools and systems and these digital tools do have ways to personalize learning for students. So there are ways to modify assignments for individual students, for groups of students. You can, reduce the number of questions. There's all kinds of different strategies that you can use within the technology to help maintain those type of accommodations, modifications that you might find in a classroom, as well as I work real closely with a lot of digital accessibility in terms of visually impaired, hearing and deaf or hard of hearing. So we will be coming out with more resources for that. And we will also have Dr. Mary Keel on our staff, who's our EC specialist. We'll be working together to put some virtual office hours together where we can maybe answer some more of those questions too.
Thank you, Chris. Couple questions here that I think I can handle. One question about EVOS. EVOS is, I would say, is not our priority at this time. We need to focus on serving kids. Those decisions will come from the state level at a later date. But at this time, I wouldn't worry about how this impacts EVOS. I would make sure that we're focusing on how we can impact kids. And another question that we've got, again, we've got several questions around specific tools and specific LMSs. I had one question about Google Classroom versus Canvas. What I will say is that it would be our recommendation that you use whatever the district provides to you. And through the next few weeks, we will be trying to post resources to help with Canvas and other LMSs that we are aware districts are using. So that's all for questions and answers. We'll have another slide toward the end of the presentation, so keep those questions coming.
Thanks, Brandon, for adding in those questions. Now let's talk about some best practices. There are some useful and proven strategies to make this jump into online learning a successful reality. Before you start teaching online, make the following clear. How will your students access the lessons? In your face-to-face classroom, you have a start and end date with your classroom pacing for everything you assign. The same would be true for online. Also, spell out to students how each lesson is structured and what the learning outcomes are for each lesson, and how the outcomes will be assessed. Be clear about what the roles and responsibilities will be both for you and the student for each lesson. Consider all of these areas for each lesson you present online. Questions you ask yourself up front may lessen the number of logistical questions you have from the students as they go through the assignments. Next slide, please. Spend as much time as needed before the start of the instruction to make sure you are comfortable with the digital tools, resources, and modes of communication. And make sure you understand the technology and tool features, benefits, and limitations before assigning them to students. Next, we have a couple of suggestions to help ensure that all students are familiar with the means of online communication used to support the module content. Setting up an icebreaker that familiarizes the student with the mechanics and technical aspects of the technology is an effective practice. You could also set up an orientation module or lesson. This will allow your students to focus more on the content once they begin on the lessons or assignments. Next slide, please. Once your lessons are underway, you will begin your role as a facilitator for your online content. Try to be an active member of your class discussions. However, don't over-facilitate. When possible, avoid praising responses. Instead, comment on ideas or ask additional questions as follow-up to ensure understanding. You don't need to respond to every comment. Purposely step back and allow the students to engage in the content conversations of your online community. Be sure to also watch for students who are absent from the online environment and get in touch with them quickly. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Jennifer. You have now received several best practices and ideas to let your creativity lead the way for creating and teaching your content online. Some of you may be overwhelmed. Here are a few action steps to help you start with today. So we have given you a lot of resources, but I'm sure this is going through many of your minds. Where do I begin? So here are some action steps that you can start thinking about right away. First and most importantly, verify with your district what specific LMS or application you will need to use. Then we suggest start small. Work on only one lesson to begin adding your content to the LMS or the application. Identify only one digital tool that you can learn and then share with your students as you start this process. Identify only one way to assess your students' learning. Set up a time frame for content creation and starting instruction, and build a pacing guide for the next few weeks. Frame your first communication with your students to let them know when, where, and how to begin and what to expect. Communicate this with your students. Then implement the lesson, monitor, and adjust. Once you've done all this, repeat all these steps in your next lessons. Slowly add more resources, tools, and types of assessments as you become more comfortable. Starting small is important. It's important not only for you, but for your students as you make this transition. You don't want to overwhelm yourself or overwhelm your students. With that, I'm going to pass it back for a final round of questions and answers, and then we will share some other resources and continuing help that we have provided for all of you. Adam?
Well, not Adam. You've been demoted to Brandon, but
Hey, Brandon.
hey. So we're really not getting any real questions, but what we're seeing a lot of in the chat is a lot of uncertainty, people being stressed, people just wondering how in the world they're going to do this, that they feel so overwhelmed. Well, I wish I had a clear or anyone on the panel had a clear answer to that. What I will say is if everybody on the call can remember back to that first semester you had student teaching, remember that stress, that vulnerability, that learning that took place during that semester. And I want you to channel that in this time where we're all transitioning into something new. Be the lead learner in your classroom, learn and get better every day so that we can serve our students during this very unprecedented time. As state leaders, as well as your district, will be coming out with multiple items to support you, to help you during this time. But remember, we're all in it together, and we will get through it. Again, just final comment. Remember, we will have the FAQ coming out, and we will continue to post resources to help you guys during this difficult time.
Thank you, Brandon. And I just want to ask, to add to what Brandon said, please remember that you're not in this alone. You have help in terms of your colleagues in your schools, in your districts, and we have set up some other additional resources where we will try and help you to the best of our capacity. Also, the second thing I'd like to reiterate is start small. You know, once you have the first lesson up and running, it's going to feel a lot better. Have faith in yourself that you can do it. With that, Adam or Brandon, I'm going to pass it back.
Okay, thank you. Can someone drop the link in the chat to the input form? Okay, thank you, Brian. We have a form we would like you to fill out today, and it gives some feedback on what you saw today and gives us an idea on resources that we need to include on our resource page. And could you folks go ahead and drop the other two links in as well, the bios page with the resources? Okay, thank you. And then the resources page from DPI as well. I think that
While this slide's up there, I'll reiterate the fact if we're really just trying to gather as much input from each of you as we can to try to figure out what drives the next steps for us, what resources do we give you, what webinars do we put together, how do you need our support? So this is really key to the whole entire piece.
and we've mentioned we will have live office hours. We'll have the details on that on our resource page, along with the specific dates and times on those. And those will start, it's the 25th, next Wednesday already, yes. And that brings us to the end. Did we, we squeezed that in under an hour. So we know that was a ton of information. So again, on our resource page, we will have this presentation. We have it recorded. Plus we will just have the PowerPoint for you as well, plus an FAQ document from all the questions that you're asking right now. So you'll find links to resources and to other websites as well. So be sure to check back on that page. Can we drop that resource link in one more time? I think I have it here. Yeah, there we go.
As you leave, I see some questions about CEUs. Yes, we will provide certificates for this hour of training, and we will email them to you using the email that you used to sign in.
And that is it. Thank you so much for attending today. Saw that we were at least over 600 for this session as well. So just an incredible testament on how much North Carolina teachers care about their students. And you can go ahead and exit the room. Once we close out, it will usher everyone out of the room.